Hello and welcome back to Overbooked. I'm Amanda and today we're going to be doing my June wrap-up. Well, in June, I only read 4 books. So I don't know if I should be allowed to be called a bookstagrammer or a booktuber because I'm really struggling to finish something. If I read an email to its full capacity, I feel pretty good. But here we are. I would like to say maybe, I would say all of them are pretty good quality though, so it was worth it. We're gonna dive in. Let's chat about the books. So the first book that I finished in June that I started in May was Voices of Chernobyl. So I read this for the Reading Women Challenge and I have a book review coming out tomorrow. Oh my god, so exciting. I do have a review coming out, or it's already out, so I will link it down below if you guys want to check that out. But Voices of Chernobyl is a collection of just like experts or like viewpoints and stories that our author went around and interviewed people who were affected by Chernobyl, and she essentially wrote down their story after she interviewed them. It was pretty sad to read. I think in my mid-year freakout tag, I said this was probably the only book that's made me cry this year. It's sad. It's very, very sad, but it's also interesting to see the range of the emotions and how different people were affected differently by Chernobyl, or how many different viewpoints there were. I mean, obviously there are some people who hated Chernobyl, they know it was terrible, they can't believe that they were affected by this radiation, like that they're scarred for life, but then there was also some people who just didn't believe that it really was that bad. There are some people who sneak back into like the restricted area and they live there and they don't care. So it's just a very like varying points of view, but very, very interesting. And there was two stories that really just made me cry, and I go into that further into my review. The next book that I finished was The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, and I've had this on my want to read list for a while now. You know, it's been everywhere. I think when it first came out, like it was just all over BookTube, it was all over Bookstagram, so I'm finally glad that I got to read it. So this is a book that I actually listened to on audio. I actually use the app Scribd, and I'm trying to get through. I don't want to pay for Scribd anymore because I have full access to my library, so I'm like, we're getting through all these books I saved and then we're deleting this app. It is a nice app. Also, you know, let's just do a little plug here. This is not an ad, I'm not being paid for this, but if you guys are looking for an alternative to, you know, an Amazon app, what is the Amazon thing? I don't remember I think it's just Kindle, which, whatever, I'm not judging. I asked for a Kindle on my registry, so, my wedding registry. Somebody better buy it. Scribd is a nice alternative. It's like $10.99 a month, and I don't have access to every single book, but the majority of books are on there. So, $10.99. I would say it was pretty worth it during the pandemic. Okay, anyways, I listened to this book, and I thought it was really good. I thought it was gonna be more scary than what it was. And I don't know if it was because I listened to it on audio. So like when I listen to my books, I like go for walks, like I'm like doing things. So I don't know if I'm catching everything, maybe I'm missing something. But I didn't think it was as scary as I thought. But The Only Good Indians follows a couple of characters, I think mainly 2 or 3-ish. And it kind of just chronicles the life of these 4 indigenous men after this hunting party that they go on, and the conflict that arises from that event and the repercussions that follow for them. It's just an interesting, how do I say this? It was like I had to think the entire time I was reading, because I didn't know, like there's so many times where I was like, who is the bad guy here? Like who is the monster? Who am I trying to find? Who should I not trust? And it's hard because I think our author does a really good job of like cloaking and giving you false clues to keep you guessing, which I really enjoy in a thriller or a horror book, because like I don't want to know. I think that's when you did a really good job, is like when I am truly shocked at the end and I'm like, what? So this was a very good example of that. I listened to a couple of, I think I only listened to one, but I listened to a live discussion with Eat Brody and then a couple other bookstagrammers, and they made up a really good point that I would just like to point out in this as well. I don't know if I'm the most qualified person to review this book, because there's a lot of references to indigenous culture. There's a lot of things that are prevalent in this book that are something that you would have to understand indigenous culture to kind of understand in the book, which is obvious. I mean, it's an Own Voices book. Stephen Graham Jones is indigenous, and it's about indigenous characters, so obviously. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't read this book if you're not indigenous at all, and you should get most of it. Like, I followed along great. But I think there was some critique from some people who were not indigenous who were saying like, oh, I understand why this was so important. Or like, for example, basketball is very prevalent throughout the book, and it's just like a main like topic of, and it's what all the characters kind of have, like, you know, they all love basketball. And that's something that's very prevalent in indigenous cultures is they play basketball, they love basketball, that's their favorite sport. So that was something that just an example, but so something that you had to like keep in mind. So I think after you read the book, I think it is important to go listen to discussions by indigenous reviewers who are reviewing this book, and to actually get their perspective on it as well. So I'm going to link a couple reviews that I enjoyed listening to or watching on BookTube, and I really highly recommend that you guys check those out. But otherwise, I thought The Only Good Ideas was pretty good. I'm not really into, so this is the only things I didn't really like, and this is just a preference-wise, is I'm not into like magical realism, I'm not really into fantasy, and there is some hints of that in this book, and that's just not something that I am sold on usually. So that's just the only downfall for me. But otherwise, it was great. I loved the characters. I read Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, something. I read this for my workbook club, and interesting enough, the person who wanted to read a classic, which the majority of us were not on board with, but he wanted to. He didn't show up, you guys. He didn't show up to the discussion, and I was like, rude. You know, I know this is a workbook club, and if you're busy with work, fine, but I was peeved, you know? Like, you're gonna sit here and you're gonna make me read another classic? I'm not a huge classic person, and I did it, and I'm here. Still kind of pissed. I read Fahrenheit 451, and to this guy's credit, I actually kind of enjoyed it. Well, you know what, I'll say this. The book was fine. You know, I got through it easier than I thought I was going to, but I really enjoyed the discussion that I had with my coworkers more than I think I enjoyed reading the actual book. There's just a really good discussion that we had with like parallels and comparisons to what was happening in Fahrenheit 51 to what was happening today in our today's society, and how like well Ray Bradbury kind of like anticipates like technology. Like there's one part in the book where like one of the characters is like talking to the main character through an earpiece, and it's like, oh, well, that's like a very standard thing. Like very basic. I could have an AirPod and I'm on the phone with somebody, you know? So it was interesting, and it was fun. But I mean, I don't really know if I need to give the synopsis of Fahrenheit 451, but was written in like the 60s, I believe. And that's when like there was a ton of like propaganda going around, and like the Red Scare, like against Russia. So Ray Bradbury created this like society where he thought, like he was scared that the US was going to go down, whereas like it's censoring the things that you can read or know about or the information that you receive, and essentially kind of like just brainwashing you, and like how he thought society was going, where like society had like a very short attention span. So the government essentially, which was interesting also to really dig into, is like the government didn't really like, besides like burning the books, like you couldn't read books, but like besides like really like straight up just not giving you the information, the society was easily swayed. Like the society had such a short attention span. They didn't really want to ask questions. They didn't want to feel uncomfortable. They didn't want to go out of their way to do anything. So they kind of were just fine with what they were given and what they were told. And like the government really didn't have anything else to do. Like there was nothing that were like, you know, you couldn't not sit there and listen to all these screens. So it was interesting. But anyways, so that's the premise, is like this, it's the society, and I just lost my train of thought. So the book is about this like society that Ray Bradbury envisions, and in the society it's illegal to own books, and so firefighters actually burn books. They're called on to start fires, not to end them. And our main character is a firefighter, and after encountering one of his neighbors numerous times and having conversations with her, he kind of like wakes up to what's going on around him. I would say like everyone's like in this like trance, and like he kind of gets out of this trance and starts to ask a lot of questions, starts to like try to say a lot of things, and it kind of just spirals out of there. And we watch him kind of try to get out of this scenario. And then we just talked about like, so in my book club, we talked about how like in today's society, you know, everyone has very short attention spans. I work for an agency that, like a marketing agency. Regardless, like we have, you know, we make videos, we make materials, and a lot of the times it's like, okay, we really have to just capture somebody's attention, otherwise they're not gonna read this. You know, there's like the videos have to be short and concise because people aren't gonna spend the time to watch the entire video, kind of like with booktube, where I need to learn how to be more concise. But you know, that's the thing today is like everyone knows, like that's why like TikTok is so crazy, because it's like, you know, it's a video, it's usually short, and people can absorb it. They don't have to read anything necessarily, so they can just keep swiping and swiping and swiping. That's what our attention span is. And it was interesting to compare the two. So I actually, if you are looking for a good book to use for a book club, I thought this was actually a really good discussion, and I almost thought that we could have kept talking about everything. And it was a really short book, under 300 pages. So the last book that I finished in June is another like magical realism book that I actually was pleasantly surprised I really enjoyed. And it's Sharks in the Time of Saviors by Kauai Strong Washburn. And I read this because my friend Rachel told me to read it, and I was a bee, and I read it before she had a chance to get it. So Rachel, I don't know if you watch these anymore, but I'm really sorry. But she's hopefully gonna read it soon, and then we'll talk about it. Anyways, I loved this book. I think this is gonna be one of my favorite books this year, for real. I was not expecting it, but this is also another Own Voices book, so it's about Hawaiian characters and the Hawaiian setting for some of the book, and it is by a Hawaiian author. So just FYI, I like to share that information. Sharks in the Time of Saviors, it's about this family, and they're, you know, kind of down on their luck, they're struggling financially, and they're gonna move from one island to the next in hopes of, you know, capturing or getting more job opportunities. And they have some cash that they had scrimped up for this move, and they had some extra cash that they could spend on, you know, to treat themselves to this like cruise or boat ride. And on this boat ride, one of their children is tossed overboard. He falls overboard. I don't remember how he gets there. But instead of just getting, you know, carried away by the waves, lost forever, he is rescued by a group of sharks who carry him in their mouth and gently bring him back to the boat. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? After this, it is pretty much believed, it is thought that this boy has like just magical powers that are given to him by Hawaiian gods, and that he is like just this chosen person, essentially. Which actually gets like more validated as like the book goes on, because he like appears to have some sort of abilities that no one can really explain, and not even himself. Like he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't really know the limits to his abilities. So it's crazy. But I really, really enjoyed this book because I feel like I've referenced There in a couple of my videos, but this is what it reminds me of, and it's probably not just relevant to There, but it's just like a multiple character perspective book, which I just super love. So every chapter is from a different character's perspective, which I thought was just really interesting, and I thought just really worked in the scenario, because you have this family unit, mother, dad, and then you have 3 siblings. And I thought the 3 sibling stories were the most fascinating, because you have this son, this brother, who has these abilities, who is just applauded by the community around him. He gets money for having these abilities. Like, he is super, super smart, like unreal smart. So he gets enrolled in these private, like exclusive schools that he gets paid, like that has a free ride to go to. It's just literally like, you know, is just loved by his parents and just like adored because of these abilities and his smarts and his knowledge. And so you get his perspective of like having that pressure on him, not really knowing what's so special about him, like trying to figure it out. But then you also get like the 2 perspectives from his 2 other siblings, like his brother and his sister, and having to live in that limelight of that sibling, and how to like try to make and carve a place for yourself in this world outside of your brother, outside of this like, you know, this aura that he has around him, was just really, really good, and just so well, like just so well put together. I just loved it. I just loved those 2 perspectives of the 2 other siblings, because I think they were just so real and so like authentic, and that I just super loved that part. So the book follows them as they grow up and go to school, and how their lives, you know, come together when they're in Hawaii, and then how they come apart after they go to school, and then how they eventually all come back together. And it's just kind of like this really just powerful tale. Like I would say it is like magical realism because of this like magical aspect and like the Hawaiian gods, but I also think it's just really a pure authentic story of family and how a family structure operates, and you know, the weird like nuances of having a family that I don't think a lot of people like kind of talk about or explore. And I just thought it was really interesting, and I just loved it. I love this book. So good. Those were the 4 books that I spent 20 minutes talking about. Remember when I said people have very short attention spans? Tell me why some of you guys just stop watching after 2 minutes of these videos. You know I see that. But regardless, that's okay, because sometimes that's mainly what I do. Thanks so much for watching. In the comments below, what did you read in June? What did you read? Let me know what was your favorite book you read in June. What are you looking forward to reading like this month in July? I would love to hear it. And please, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you have not already. And I will see you guys next time.